This is the story of 5 men who are victims of war. They fought the longest war in American history, witnessed America's first military defeat. They all saw heavy combat in Vietnam. Although they were all decorated for heroism, none of them received a hero's welcome. These 5 men are now serving prison terms. None of them had criminal records prior to their military experience. Dwayne Mabee, Private U.S. Marine Corps, awarded the Purple Heart for wounds received in combat. James McAllister, Medic U.S. Army, awarded 3 Bronze Stars for gallantry at Hamburger Hill. Kenneth Patterson, Sergeant U.S. Army, received the Republic of Vietnam Commendation Medal and other decorations. Raymond Baker, Sergeant U.S. Marine Corps, awarded 13 Air Medals, the Vietnam Cross of Gallantry with Palms, and the Purple Heart. Footage you will see in the next hour was culled from the Vietnam War years. Of our 5 men, only this man will be seen as he was in Vietnam. Albert Allen Dobbs, Sergeant U.S. Army, awarded 3 Bronze Stars, 2 for valor, 3 Army Commendation Medals, 2 for valor, the Vietnam Cross of Gallantry, the Purple Heart. According to his presidential citation, Sergeant Dobbs' devotion to duty and personal courage were in keeping with the highest traditions of the military service and reflect great credit upon himself, his unit, and the United States Army. Dobbs, Albert Allen, 12 years later, also known as Pee Wee or Skip, now serving 7.5 years without parole for attempted armed robbery. Hundreds of thousands of men who saw heavy combat in Vietnam have been arrested since discharge. Their arrest rate is almost twice that of non-veterans of the same age. There are no accurate figures on how many of these men have been incarcerated, but a Veterans Administration study concludes that the greater a vet's exposure to combat, the more likely his chance of being arrested or convicted. This is one legacy of the Vietnam War. In 1965, Vietnam seemed like just another foreign war, but it wasn't. It was different in many ways, and so were those who did the fighting. In World War II, the average age of the combat soldier was 26. In Vietnam, he was 19. Pee Wee Dobbs was 17 when he volunteered for Vietnam.
When I was growing up, where I grew up at, military service was an eventuality. You felt the obligation. My father was in the military, my uncles were in the military. Everyone that I knew who was older had had a military experience.
I'm a soldier, I do my job, always do my best, and the lady rest,
No, it's funny, I saw this guy one time with this real nice blue uniform on. I was ready for it, and I guess that's what I was looking for, I guess. A way to be recognized. I just fell in love with that glory of wearing that uniform.
I became a medic because I would have the opportunity to express my ability to its fullest, because I felt to believe that I had the capabilities of doing wonders with my hands.
I went in for data processing accounting. And after a short while in there, they had the publicized about airborne. And I wrote home to my girlfriend about that and told her I was going to go into that. And she said, well, you're going to wind up in Vietnam. I didn't think so at the time. And I went down and took my jump training and got my orders 17 days later for Vietnam.
Where I go, everywhere I go, there's a drill sergeant there. There's a drill sergeant there. Everywhere I go, everywhere I go.
When I made the decision to go airborne, it was, I guess, the culmination of 17 years of being littler than everybody. So I just wanted to do something macho, and I saw being a paratrooper as the manifestation of macho. You know, if John Wayne would have been in the Army, he would have been airborne. For the first time in my life, I knew what it was like to be tall, because I was tall, 10 feet at least.
We went by troop carrier, a long, drawn-out process. And we crossed the international date line. We got to Okinawa. We had to stop for, I don't know, supplies or something, refueling, whatever. But, and we had 4 hours liberty in Okinawa, at which time everybody got loaded, naturally. I guess everybody figured that's the last time you're gonna see any booze anyway, so that was it. We dug right into the sauce. I don't remember getting back to the ship. But when I woke up the next morning, it seemed like there was a whole new group of guys on that ship. Everybody was beginning to be aware that there's no more stops.
The pilot announced on the PA system that we were approaching the shores of Vietnam. That's where my heart seemed like it fell to my bottom. And when we landed, and I took my first step out the door of the plane, there were 2 things that hit me: the heat and the smell. A smell that I never had experienced in my life, and the heat that I never experienced.
And I was terrified. Everybody was terrified. I mean, we stuck out like sore thumbs. And we were just confused and running into each other, and you hear these war stories bouncing around. None of them are true, but then you believe everything. They had VC that were 12 feet tall. They captured the 25th Infantry with a bag full of rocks, you know. Everybody went after Ho Chi Minh with broken bayonets. These were the baddest dudes I ever saw in my life. I was probably as scared of the guys in the 101st as I was of the Viet Cong. These guys were certified bad. They had on jungle boots that looked like the devil himself had thrown away. They had on fatigues with big gaping holes that had just rotted through, and they just had that look in their eye. They look at you and you know, I've been there. I'm bad, I've been there. I was scared to death.
Good evening. The heaviest fighting of the past 2 weeks continued today, 25 miles northwest of Saigon. Men of the American 25th Infantry Division, joined by men of the 101st Airborne Division, killed at least 147 North Vietnamese regular forces in fighting yesterday and today around Trung Ba. U.S. casualties were 8 dead and 13 wounded in fighting there.
The first time I was ever under fire, I'd been in the woods maybe a week. There was a guy beside me, I didn't even know his name, he was from another squad. We caught some fire from the wood line. I got down on one knee. I wasn't really sure what was going on. I turned around to ask this guy what we should do. You know, you're trained and everything, but when the caps start flying, you get confused. I looked at this guy to ask him what to do. He'd been hit right below his eye. And the side of his face was blown away. He wasn't falling, he was just standing, and he kind of half turned and fell. And I remember somebody screaming at me to get down, and I was just looking at him. The rounds were flying every place.
The first time I saw action was during the Ted offensive. And I went in on an unarmed helicopter. We were going in picking up wounded. And the only armament we had was one machine gun. And when you land right in the middle of the city there's wounded people laying all over the place, and you realize they're shooting at you and you don't have anything to shoot back with. And it'll scare the hell out of you. And it doesn't hit you right off that people are out there trying to kill you until you start picking these guys up. They got holes in them all over the place, and they're bleeding all over you.
How'd you feel the first time you saw that?
Scared.
Unlike Vietnam, World War II saw America unite behind her fighting men. The two wars were just as different on the front lines as they were back home. During World War II, the 6th Marine Regiment served 4 years in the Pacific, but only engaged the enemy for about 6 weeks. In Vietnam, the combat soldier typically served a 12-month tour of duty, but was exposed to hostile fire almost every day of his tour.
Sergeant Dobbs was a small feller in stature, but a great big man. I even remember the brigade commander knew who Pee Wee was because of his actions and what Pee Wee did. And I had the fortunate opportunity to put a medal on Pee Wee for his bravery and for his actions up in our corps, out in the Ashau Valley, in the vicinity of Ashau Valley, during my tenure as battalion commander.
If he didn't have to talk on the radio and call in artillery, then he threw hand grenades, or Pee Wee fired his rifle, or Pee Wee gave first aid. Pee Wee rescued wounded men. I felt that if I was going to survive, I was going to survive because Pee Wee was there and Pee Wee was on the job. And I heard 110%. Well, Pee Wee always gave 210%. Pee Wee was worth 5 men.
I guess about 4 or 5 of us just stayed real tight. Rick was a radio telephone operator for a while. He got off a point, was an RTO for a while, and I had to be close to radio because I was calling in artillery, so we were kind of always together on positions. And that was good, because if you had to be in a combat zone and you had to turn your life over to somebody for a few hours while you got some sleep, there was nobody better to turn it over to than Rick.
We were all pretty much like a family, you know? I mean, it's like, it's about the same way you feel about the people that live on the same block you do in the city, you know? The only way I can say it is, you know, take a guy that lives on a block in any city in the United States, And for 6 months, one of his neighbors gets killed every day, or couple out of a week or something like that, you know. And how would he feel about that, you know, knowing that he might be the one coming up next? So.
In Saigon, a U.S. military spokesman said today more than 700 enemy troops were killed last week in that sensitive border area. Throughout all of South Vietnam, the enemy lost a total of 2,689 soldiers. American losses, however, were the highest in more than 2 months. 228 U.S. troops were killed in action.
His name was Acevedo. Well, by this time, me and Ace, I guess we'd, you know, got to know each other's, what each other's gonna be doing, you know, at all times. So we've pretty much stuck together, tried to maintain a low profile, I guess. While we was on this listening post, it was nothing new to us. We've been on listening posts several times, together and with other people. Listening posts were beginning to be routine and all that, you know, so